What is up, everybody? Hoang Zero here, and today I'm going to be bringing you the EX4 tier list for the standard format. This time around, Zero is a little bit busy, so it will just be me talking about this tier list this time, but hopefully I should be able to provide you guys enough insight and just ask thoughts as to why the decks have been placed as where they were. And so it's all out of order, and that's because we're going to be primarily focusing on the decks that I think are going to centralize the format, and then that makes it a little bit easier to explain why other decks are placed where they are, because if we talk about why this deck is tier 3 because it has a bad matchup in this deck, then it only makes sense if we talk about that bad matchup in specific. Let me get that real quick. Without further ado, getting right into it, one of the biggest predictions I think a lot of people have going into the format are just, is Hunters. Hunters is arguably the best deck in the format and going into EX4, and the reason for that is because Beelzemon was just hit. Beelzemon was one of the few decks that was actually faster than Hunters in terms of its ability to put pressure onto the board, and like Hunters, I know it's the deck that's like, oh, you play a Tamer, and you play Tamers for like 2 or 3 turns, and then all of a sudden you just explode and just win the game straight up. In that sense, it's really difficult to contest Hunters because you really can't interact with them unless you have Tamer removal. So what ends up happening is that, okay, you amass this like really nice board, or you make a really strong blocker, and then Hunters comes out for very cheap, and then they go Arrest or Drum on Superior mode, Tuck, or something along those lines. They can Quartzmon you. There's a large plethora of things they can really do. And so back in BT12, Biel's versus Hunters, Biel's ended up winning it because of its speed. It was faster than Hunters on the kill turn, but now that Beelzemon is a little bit slower due to the EX2 Impmon being hit to 1, this does give Hunters a lot more leeway in terms of like what it can really do. And so for that reason, if you look at the grand scheme of the meta, and these are either decks that I have received support very recently, decks I think could be really, could see some competitive success, or just some fan favorites all around, I think Hunters into majority of the meta does very, very, very well, because no decks have a counter to Superior mode. If you play a Tamer, if you play a second body, you are now susceptible to Superior mode. Not only that, but just the Hunter's playstyle in general is very difficult to beat for a lot of decks, and Quartzmon is also very problematic for quite a few decks. So for that reason, I think declaring Hunters as the potential best deck in the format, I don't think is very crazy. I think that's pretty fair. Moving forward, speaking of the deck that just got hit, Beelzemon. Beelzemon is still a very fantastic deck. Yes, it did lose a little bit of its speed, but in testing with the 1 EX2 Impmon, it was still able to perform relatively well, actually, just because Beelzemon X is such a powerful card, and you still have access to like Mill Deathslinger, Mill Rivals Barrage. Really, you just have like a huge toolbox that you have access to. And you can compensate for the lack of EX2 Impmon by running cards like the Darkness Wave and other cards such as that in order to compensate for that speed. And of course, it's not the same because nothing can really truly replace the EX2 Impmon. Definitely it's doable, but that lack of speed, I think, is really detrimental in the long run, as well as having a really bad matchup into one of the other decks in Tier 1, which we can talk about in a second. But as a result, I do think Beelzemon is now a tier 2 deck, just because that drop in speed. Your kill pressure, still very good. Beelzemon X is still a ridiculous kill turn. Most decks are really not able to stop that, but it's a matter of getting to that point that can be a little bit more difficult. And talking about the other tier 1 deck that I did want to speak about, you may think it's Bloomlord because it's up next on the thing, but that's just because I didn't move it. I think it's Machinedramon. Machinedramon in testing is probably the other deck in contention for best deck in the format, and it's absolutely ridiculous just how powerful this deck is with the addition of Chaosdramon X. So I personally do think that Machinedramon is arguably the best deck in the format as far as overall encompassing the bubble. But I think a lot of Machinedramon players will find it difficult to play into Hunters if you just don't have a lot of experience on that matchup. And as a result, I think Hunters will slightly edge out for Machinedramon, even though the matchup is definitely super doable. Yes, if you ever play an Analog Man, then you're getting your super huge stack tucked away. That definitely sucks and everything. But if you just don't play Analog, you don't play a second body, then they really can't break over your giant brick wall. They're gonna play super hard for chip damage, in which case you have to respond with hard mulliganing for your blocker. Either you hard mulligan for blocker or you hard mulligan for BT11 Machinedramon. There really is no other exception to that. If you know you're playing into hunters, even if you have like a pretty decent hand, I would say, I think you still hard mulligan in that matchup. Also, Quartzmon is really difficult to beat if you don't have the Chaos Tremons to deal with it. I think on average, the average Hunters player versus average Machine Tremon player is going to swing in the Hunters' favor, even though Machine Tremon has that brick wall, like we said, in Mega Dramon. And for the record, I do think you play 3 Mega Dramon just for that reason. But yeah, Machine Dramon into almost every single other deck in the format is just really, really, very, very potent. Yeah, like you have decks like Blue Flare that can stun you out, but then you just redirect with Analog Man. Bloom Lord is pretty good because they tap you out, but of course, if you have the Analog Man, you can force them to redirect. You have the D-Digivolve, you have a pretty solid board wipe. I think that matchup's really 50-50, but we take those. A lot of the Greymon style of decks have no longer run the D-Digivolve options, so as a result, your matchup gets a lot better. Ulforce, you have Tamer Pop, and really the list just goes on and on. So yeah, overall, I think Machine Dramon is probably the other tier 1 deck. Speaking of other like really powerful decks that have made a huge splash recently, we do have Bloom Lord, and Bloom Lord has performed exceptionally well at the tail end of BT12. Chungman took it to second place in the most recent regionals, as well as getting second place or winning. I forget which one it is, but it did very, very, very well in MomoCon as well. So Bloom Lord is performing very, very good. The only caveat to Bloom Lord, I would definitely say, is your Machine Dramon matchup's a little bit 50-50, but that's totally fine, right? That's not a reason that you would take this out of tier 1, right? The real reason I think you would not allow Bloom Lord in tier 1 is because of the introduction of Ruin Mode. I think Ruin Mode as a card is very, very painful to deal with as Bloom Lord because it removes practically your entire board. You are going to struggle a lot with getting additional bodies to get those Hydro procs off, to get those Bloom Lord procs off. And so just because I expect to see Ruin Mode in quite a few decks like Beelzemon, I think Bloom Lord does take a bit of a hit. But I kind of want to say that it's going to end up better than Beelzemon. But Bloom Lord is still very good. Your Hunter's matchup can be a little bit weird just because getting tucked by Superior Mode really sucks, and they have a lot of board removal in the form of a Kakimon, in the form of Shoutmon, Omni Shoutmon. They can Quartzmon you, and that can be really painful. So Hunters is kind of a rough matchup. Machine Dramon's 50-50, and anything but Ruin Mode can really prove to be a bit difficult. This next deck, we do have Black War Greymon. Black War Greymon actually outperformed, rather, is the correct term. Black War Greymon outperformed regular War Greymon. And I know regular War Greymon was this big bag boogeyman from the Japanese BT12 format, but with the hit to Greymon X, the deck has significantly underperformed, and so it looks like a lot of the success from the Greymon Tribal has stemmed from Black War Greymon style of decks, just because of having that additional defensive utility. Is pretty good. But I do think pure Black War Greymon isn't really the way to go, and I think going into these future formats, with Machine Dramon especially on the rise in popularity, yes, Black War Greymon has a pretty solid matchup into Hunters due to having cards like the Hades Force, like the BT8 Black War Greymon. That matchup can still be a little bit tricky just because getting tucked under is never a really fun time. So if you don't see your Hades, the game can be a little bit more difficult, and of course Hades is not searchable, so do keep that in mind until we get our training boosts in BT14. And like I said, the Machine Dramon matchup is pretty difficult, and I think the Bloom Lord matchup can also be very difficult now that you are losing out on that speed trade. So I do think Black War Greymon is going to be a tier 3 deck. With all of that being said, and just bumping this up real quick, War Greymon, like we said, War Greymon performed very, very poorly in BT12, performed far worse than regular Black War Greymon. It doesn't receive any new additions into into EX4. Hades Force, like we mentioned, is really good into Arrestor Dramon, but War Greymon, very bad matchup into Machine Dramon unless you default back into that D-Digivolve package, and without that, you're just in for a really bad time. So by that logic, I think War Greymon and Black War Greymon are both tier 3. That being said, we do have Greymon Toolbox, which I think plays very differently from both of the other decks, and I think Greymon Toolbox is actually tier 2. I think Greymon Toolbox is pretty close to encroaching onto that tier 1 territory. Really what holds it back is going to be a little bit that consistency issue, just because you're going to be playing so many like 1-ofs and like lower ratio in cards. Not to mention that your Machine Dramon matchup is a little bit more difficult just in general. But I think Greymon Toolbox is actually a very fantastic deck. Being able to flex between the Black War Greymon, I think it gives you a lot of utility. If you do the Black War Greymon, you're all in on that package. You come up to very obvious issues. If you come up to the War Greymon package and you're all in on that, you have your own obvious issues as well. But with the mix of the two, you can compensate for those two issues. So I think Toolbox Greymon is going to be very, very good because you have the Hades for the Hunters matchup. You can fit in the Digivolve package for Machine Dramon. It's just a matter of finding space, and I think that's going to be really where the difficulty lies. But moving forward, we do have Chaos Gallantmon. Chaos Gallantmon did receive some new support. It has the ability to a lot more floating for the level 6s with the new Chaos Gallantmon. It also received a new Guilmon that has Rush, which you get 20 cards in trash. Deck is tier 3, unfortunately. It's really nifty. It's very cool. The payout's just not really great. And then we have Alliance. Alliance is a really fun deck. I really like Alliance. Alliance has a lot of different tools that you can play. Alliance is one of the decks that can really abuse the hidden potential as well in this format. Being able to hidden potential into Quartzmon or into Ruin mode, you really just have a lot of options that you can go about. But I think the issue with Alliance, until we get more support for green top end, is just going to be the fact that you just don't have a really great payout. The Cherubimons themselves aren't really good payout, and having to rely on your 7 as your cash out is not very consistent. So for that reason, I think it's tier 3. And then Dark Knightmon. Dark Knightmon as a deck it does get a new wave of support, and the new wave of support is pretty good. You get a Skull Knightmon that plays Nene for free. You get a Deadly Axe that is discard 1, draw 2, and you get the new Dark Knightmon that is essentially a BT 10 Dark Knightmon, but like a little bit worse, and that's totally fine. The deck, you are going to lose into Hunters. You are going to probably 50-50 into Machine Dramon, and you're going to lose into majority of the other tier 2 decks. You lose into Bloom Lord, you probably lose into Greymon. Yeah, so I don't know. Dark Knight's kind of tier 3, even with the new support, which is unfortunate. But you do have some very clear lines of strengths that I think if you took Dark Knightmon, if you pair into those good matchups, I think you'll be fine. Just don't pair into anything with non-destruction removal, like anything with bounce, anything with DP minus. Yeah, it's a no-go. And with Shine Greymon probably on the rise in popularity, I really wouldn't bank on my odds dodging that DP minus. But speaking of that, speaking of crazy stuff, Dorbrickmon. Dorbrickmon is a deck that is not insanely consistent, but it gets like one top every single format. So it's like to its credit, it's still a pretty solid like OTK style of deck with a lot of utility, a lot of flexibility. But because it only sees like one result of format, it's really hard for me to justify ranking it super highly. But I think it has a pretty solid niche in the format. But just due to the fact that it's not a deck that performs crazy, and it's a deck that has consistency issues because you do need those 5 different Digimon to go into the Dorbrickmon for free. I do think it's tier 3. And then Red Hybrid. Red Hybrid has been performing very exceptionally well actually as of recent time, even though I personally don't like the deck. This tier list is, of course, my personal opinion, so do keep that in mind, but we will also take data into account, which is why I do think Red Hybrid is probably going to be one of the higher end tier 2 decks. And the reason I say this is because Red Hybrid into Machine Dramon is just really bad matchup. It's very bad. Your 3-cost Takuyas get popped. The Analog Man's a redirect, so it doesn't trigger the Atomic Inferno. You just can't break over Machine Dramon. That in itself is really difficult. Hunters can be very difficult because if you don't kill them first, they will kill you. Quartzmon can be very hard for you to deal with, not to mention just the Superior Mode chip. So yeah, I think your matchup into Hunters and your matchup into Machine Dramon are both not very great. But it's a deck that has very good performance as far as results go. So I think high tier 2 justifies it. Again, we do have Exomon. Exomon is a deck that does receive a buff in EX4 via Heaven's Judgment. Heaven's Judgment being a yellow 7-cost option. A yellow 7-cost option that is minus 6,000 DP, and for every color you have on your board, so the blue and green, minus additional 6,000. So it is minus 18k with your components or Exomon on board. Pretty good, right? So Exomon does receive a bit of that additional removal power. It did get second place in Japanese EX4 Nats. which is their format, and that was with a build that was running Samadhi as well as Hammerspark, so very interesting. But Examon, time and time again, has proved to just be not consistent enough to rank high in tournaments, and with that reason, just like Dorbrickmon, I think it falls into that tier 3 category. And then you do have Gallantmon. Gallantmon does receive new support in the form of the Guilmon that has Rush. Being able to slam that for 3 and then warp Digivolving with the new Tocado into your Gallantmon is a very powerful play. But Gallantmon, of course, still suffers from the same issues it historically always has, and that is being too reliant on your opponent playing the game, because if your opponent doesn't play the game, then you really can't play the game. So because of that, I think Gallantmon ends up just being a tier 3 deck, even with that new Guilmon, which is a really huge buff. But being reactive to your opponent is always just going to be an issue in Digimon, I feel like, unless you're playing decks like Security Control. But even Security Control is not so much reactive as it is forcing your opponent to make a reaction, and then you react to that reaction, and it kind of spirals like that. And then Kuzuha. So Kuzuha, when a lot of people think of Kuzuha, they will think of like Renamon support, right? The option slinger kind of stuff. I saw a build my friend Fenton showed me where it's Kuzuha armor spam, where you're getting out like 5 bodies on a turn. I think that build is very interesting, and that's probably like a really, really fun way to play this deck. But fun is the word I would use to describe this. I don't think it's a very competitive deck, and the reason why is because outside of your DP minus shenanigans, which again, if you pair into Hunters, that's very difficult to beat because you're just not putting anything on board for you to interact with. And if you're pairing into Machine Dramon, well, if they're on EX1 Machine Dramon, then you're just going to struggle into that. Obviously your tier 1 matchup's a little bit scuffed. And then your the rest of your matchups, they're fine, they're doable, but a lot of them will just, they're faster than you, or they put a lot more pressure than you down, so that can be really, really scary. And of course, with the armor situation, I think the armor version where you get out like 5 bodies is very, very, very cool. But anything with a board wipe or anything with Quartzmon, you kind of just falter. And then Mervaloop. Mervaloop does receive some new support in the form of the Falcomon line, EX4, being on ESS, on deletion, if this Digimon is deleted by an effect, anything but battle, really. Your opponent has to discard 1 card. So with Falcomon, plus Ravemon, plus the Pinamon, actually, you get a lot of value when you delete your own Digimon. So like with the Cerberusmon, for example, with Werewolf mode, or Minerva Pop kind of shenanigans, you force your opponent to discard 2 as well as gain a memory. I think that engine is really, really neat. I think into Hunters, your matchup is a little bit scary just because getting tucked under, having your Mervamon tucked under does turn off all your blocker. But you have a pretty solid matchup into Machine Dramon, actually. Now, the other caveats do come from, if you pair into Bloomlord, then Pomemon's going to ruin your day, Red Hybrid's a little bit faster than you, Beelzemon's faster than you, and Wargreymon can sometimes just wall you out. So I think this is probably a tier 3 deck. Blue Flare does receive some absolutely fantastic support coming in from EX4, being a new, both new 4s, a new 5, new Tamer, really really great support all around. But the issue with this is your matchup to Machine Dramon is you are good until they have like 2 or 3 analogs, and then you're not good anymore because then they'll redirect every single swing. Okay, well that's fine. Maybe they just won't see analog. What about Hunters? Your Hunters matchup is doomed. If the moment you play a Tamer to like Digicross and stuff like that, they will always have a way to tuck you. They can always just wait for you to just commit to the board before they like really play the game. They have so many sources that it becomes difficult to actually strip them out. Yeah, Hunters is just kind of rough. But with all of the new support that you do receive, I think for the most part you are better than like all of the other tier 3 decks. You're just probably not super high on the tier 2 list. And speaking of decks that do get newer support, we do have the new Galgamon support, so new level 3, 4, 5, and we don't got the 6 because it's Zed Garurumon and Zed sucks. But the new line is very good. Unfortunately, it doesn't really give you the offensive kill pressure that you're looking for. It gives you a little bit more of that control element-esque sort of thing, but that all being said, I don't really foresee more Galgamon really performing just because, yeah, you got new control tools, that's fine and everything, but you're still just worse Ulforce at the moment until you get that BT13 support. And I'm actually going to save Alteress for last, just personal preference, but we do have Ancient Greymon. Ancient Greymon, this is a deck that it's from all the way from BT7. That's when Ancient Greymon OTK first made its appearance through your boy Chung and I. Haha. And ever since then, it's continuously found its way into every single format just because it's one of the most linear OTKs. It's not a difficult deck. It's very much so pick it up, swing 5, Omni Blitz, good to go, good to roll. But a lot of decks are getting blocker nowadays, so it forces you to get that blue plug-in, and that's not a searchable card, so your consistencies will hit a little bit. Into Machine Dramon, you're just getting walled out without that blue plug-in, so again, you really rely on that. But with the prevalence of these, not only faster decks, but also just hard wall decks, this is probably like tier 3. And then Ravemon. Oh, so many people want Ravemon to be good. I want Ravemon to be good, frankly. But it's not. Like, your payout's really bad. It's cool. It's a very cool deck, very fun deck. The payout's just not great because your opponent chooses what they discard. So you're really not doing a lot of hand disruption in that sense. But yeah, tier 3 Ravemon I think is suitable in that sense, just because you're not really the one that's disrupting your opponent. Your opponent chooses what they want to lose. And then Shine Greymon. Shine Greymon gets some very, very fantastic support in the EX4. Not only do you get a new Agumon, new Geogray, we don't care about the level 5 and 6, those are bad. But you get Ruin Mode, and Ruin Mode is arguably the most impactful, maybe tied with like Quartzmon, level 7 in this current format. And Ruin Mode really just puts a lot of decks on ice entirely. Being able to minus 5k or minus 10k, depending, means your opponent cannot bring out a Raising, which just completely stops them in their tracks. And so that alone is enough to really pump this deck a little bit higher on the tier list. But without that BT13 support, you are lacking in that kill pressure department. So I think tier 2 is suitable for this deck, just because this is the deck to abuse Ruin Mode. And then we do have Ulforce. Ulforce has performed actually surprisingly well in BT12, and I think a large part of that is because of the Beelzemon popularity. You have a reasonably pretty good matchup into Beelzemon actually with your evade, your bounce, all that other jazz. So I think Ulforce was actually pretty good into that kind of meta. But moving forward into EX4, I think you do get a little bit worse. Your Hunter's matchup is not great because it's a deck that can abuse Quartzmon. Of course, Bloom Lord does Quartzmon. Machine Dramon can be a bit of a tricky matchup because they will have Mega Dramon to pop the arenas, as well as not being able to bounce their stacks. In general, I think Ulforce, it was pretty good pickup in BT12, but moving into EX4, where this is kind of what the meta is likely to pan out, I think it does get a little bit worse, and so for that reason, I think Ulforce is tier 3. Crossheart underperformed very significantly. I thought Crossheart would be able to keep up in speed with Beelzemon, and it turns out you kind of have to you have to high roll a little bit for that, whereas Beelzemon, they're just like standard linear game plan. Oh, look, you're dead. It's like that one meme where it's like, I'm spinning like a ballerina, and then immediately it's followed up by the fucking all the kind of stuff. Yeah, Beelzebon spinning like a ballerina in BT12. Nowadays it's not, but your Hunter's matchup is not great because they're just far more resource efficient than you. And into Chaos Dramon, you need to outpace them fast enough before they can set up. If they set up fast enough, then they're just going to wall you out. So, though that being said, I think Crossheart is a tier 3 deck. Also because, like, with the prevalence of Hades Force from the War Greymon toolbox, or the Greymon toolbox, I think that also hurts you here as well. And you just cannot play into Shine Ruin mode. And then Security Control. Security Control, pretty good. It finds its way into every single format again, just like a lot of other decks. And Security Control is a really good matchup into Machine Dramon. Very good matchup. It's probably Machine Dramon's worst matchup, actually. So good job, Security Control. But your matchup into Hunters, not so great. Pretty bad, actually. So I'm feeling tier 2. Tier 2 seems good. You're pretty good into most of tier 3 and below. You have a good Machine Dramon matchup. Bad Hunters matchup. We'll take that. Yellow Hybrid. Yellow Hybrid kind of, to me, just plays like worse Security Control, but it's still tops here and there, surprisingly. which, you know, you would think after shooting it so many times it would stop, but it just keeps coming back, which really just goes to show just how powerful BT7 yellow cards truly were. But with the Hades Force bump, with Superior Mode, and of course, if EX1 rises up, and because you're not playing SecCon package, Yellow Hybrid is feeling like a tier 3 deck. D Reaper. D Reaper is a deck that, into the predicted Beelzemon style of meta with nerfed Beelzemon, if Beelzemon was still really good, if Beelzemon was still a super popular deck, then I would say that D Reaper could be really good. But the unfortunate truth is that with Beelzemon getting weakened, that means your Machine Dramon matchup's already bad because they have BT8 Metal Greymon, so they can swing into you. War Greymon with his raid. And Hunters, if they just stack Watchman, they can break over Gatekeeper. And then they can like tuck Gatekeeper. Oh no, they can't actually tuck you away because you don't have a level. But that being said, they still have Watchmaker, and Watchmaker can just go bop bop. So I'm feeling tier 3. Tier 3 seems solid. If you didn't have to deal with this and this, there's an argument for tier 2, but like the reality is you do, so it is what it is. And last but not least, arguably the deck that everyone's excited for from EX4 is Alter S. And Alter S is a super fun deck that suffers from one huge major issue, being your consistency. And so what do I mean by that? Well, if you ping pong your Evo, cool. You play like a tier 1 deck. Honestly, it's really difficult for a lot of decks to contest with. And that's if you get there. But a good chunk of the time, you're spending more than half of your game looking for your pieces because the deck is not very consistent. So if the deck works according to plan, you feel like a tier 1 deck. If the deck it's not consistent, it's not performing, you're just not finding your pieces, it feels like a terrible tier 3 deck. So where does that leave Alter S, like, you know, in the grand scheme of things? Well, because this is a competitive tier list, and because Alter S, if you're playing competitively, you're probably playing in these 8 to 9 round tournaments, and going X and 2 alone can mean you're bubbling out. And I don't feel confident in Alter S having the consistency in order to push itself towards the top end of that and the tournament, right? So with that being said, I think it's like a high tier 3 because when it shines, it really shines. It's just a matter of making it work for 8 to 9 rounds, and I don't have enough faith in the deck to do that. So yeah, just for and people that skipped to the end of the video, I'll put it right there. So just be like, oh my god, Hoang Zero put Alter S at the tier 1. Whoa, but no, the reality is like it's like tier 3. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. I am looking forward to putting out a lot more content. With BT14 was fully released today, actually, as far as like all the cards in the set. So I'm really looking forward to testing out all of the new cards. And also, My Hero Academia also gets its new set 5 this month as well. So if you're interested in that, please look forward to that kind of stuff on the Hoang Zero channel. And Lumchop, my amazing thumbnail artist, who does a thumbnail, by the way, for this video, is setting up his shop. He has a shop already currently out, but we're setting up a new one. Make sure you go support him. So thank you so much for watching. Peace. And we're out.